Welcome back to the podcast. Millard in from McCowan today, joined by the Mikes, Mike Harrington in Buffalo, Mike Zeisberger in Toronto. First to Harrington. I think I know the answer to this, but I have to ask it. What's a bigger disappointment, Bills or Sabres?
Oh, we're getting to the point where it's almost a push here, John. I mean, they're ultimately the bigger disappointment is still going to be the Bills because people picked them as a Super Bowl team, Super Bowl level team before the season started. And they're looking at 6-6 with Kansas City and Dallas coming up. The Sabres are skittering to the bottom of the East, but you still pick them as a 7th, 8th place team in the East to make the playoffs and sneak in. So you got to rate it as the Bills, but both of them are colossal disappointments so far.
Well, I think the level of expectation, you talked about it, Bills Super Bowl, Sabres playoffs. Those are the two levels. And Zeiss, I don't know about you, but when you look at those three teams in the Eastern Conference that were supposed to contend, Detroit, Ottawa, Buffalo. One has reached expectations, the other two have disappointed. Is that fair?
Yeah, and it's kind of juxtaposed. I mean, it's kind of topsy-turvy with the way that I thought it was going to be, because I really thought that the Sabres and the Senators were a little bit of the Detroit Red Wings in their rebuild. And that was Patrick Kane aside. I mean, we don't know what kind of playing shape he's going to be in. There's a lot of question marks as to coming off the procedure that he just had. But, you have to be impressed by the way the Red Wings are playing. And on the other hand, Ottawa and Buffalo, to me, are very much head scratchers. I mean, you look at the talent, you look at the way that these teams were trending towards the end of last year, and I really didn't see any signs that these two teams would disappoint. But I would have to say, when you look across the National Hockey League, that the Ottawa Senators and the Buffalo Sabres are two of the most disappointing stories as we just passed the quarter pole of the National Hockey League season.
And we had Detroit in here this week, and I asked Derek Lalonde how to build a team, and I didn't really think it was a great way to build a team, doing it heavily through trades and free agency. And he made the point that they understood that was a risk, but they felt good with some of the guys they brought in, and the guys they brought in have all bought in, and it has become a team. And it was a very impressive team the other night in Buffalo for the first 40 minutes or so till the Sabres finally woke up.
And here's the other thing, Mike. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about how important it is in a market like Buffalo that guys like an Alec Tuck, they want to play there. Okay, that means something, and the people on the outside think that that's just us talking and that's intangibles. No, it's not intangibles. You need guys that want to be there. Okay, this is not Florida or Tampa where 10-minute ride from the arena, you're on your waterfront mansion with your jet skis ready to go. Okay,
or Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. There's something else than jet skis, but we all know what that is. But right, Mallard. But getting back to it, you look at Detroit now. They've got Dylan Larkin, DeBrincat. Now they bring in Kane, who spent some of his minor hockey years in that area. Not only do you have a skilled foundation for this team, but you have local guys that want to be there. And I think that, for too long, it was Dylan Larkin and who else? And all of a sudden now he's got a supporting cast. And, when you look at some of the top, and I don't know what their line combinations are going to be, but potentially when you look at the top lines in the National Hockey League and you think about a line of, Larkin, DeBrincat, Kane, I mean, potentially that's equitable to most number one lines and better than a lot of number one lines in the entire league.
They came from a few different areas, but they all have that commonality in the sense that they're trying to fire it back up and get prove that that they belong in the playoffs. So I'll take that motivation all day long. The other two have built differently, but there's the weight of expectations, and that changes things so much. Has that had an effect on Buffalo, Mike?
Oh, absolutely. I think last year everyone was happy. They finished 7-2-1. They finished basically one win out of the playoffs. You know, you think of the expectation in a lot of cities, they were celebrating in Buffalo, finishing 2 points out of the playoffs. But now it was real expectation this year, and I don't think some of these young players have been able to handle it. I don't think Matthias Samuelsson and Owen Power have handled expectation at all on the blue line. They look scared on the ice a lot of the time. The injuries have also been obviously a major factor, but Devin Levi came in. They gifted him the #1 spot in goal. He wasn't good enough. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's been very good. They probably should have had more of a goalie conversation in training camp. You know, Kevin Adams, the GM, really bears the weight of a lot of this. I think he said, we've arrived. This is our team. The only upgrades he made in the offseason were Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson, who've been busts on defense, frankly. And now all of a sudden they're in this pickle where they're way out of it. They're risking being last in the East. Ottawa's got all kinds of games in hand from the Sweden trip. The Sabres, you know, they fall behind every game. It's like if you were betting, spot them a 2-0 deficit every game, then start the game. And you cannot chase hockey games the way the Buffalo Sabres have done it for the last few weeks.
Well, I mean, let's be frank about this. We've seen coaches lose jobs in other cities, albeit in the Western Conference, which is a different animal.
Right.
Don Granato in trouble?
Boy. See, I'd like to say no, partly because he's signed through 2026, and Terry Pegula isn't in the market of paying coaches not to coach anymore. He's joined at the hip with Kevin Adams. Part of me says they're not going to fire the coach because that's going to turn all the crosshairs onto Kevin Adams and his lack of work in the offseason. Ordinarily, you would say, yes, the coach is in trouble here, but I'm just not sure this was a playoff or bust season for the coach and GM like it was for people on the outside of the organization. And right now, I want to see if Granato has any answers here in the next week or two to get this team out of it. It's still only a 4-game losing streak. They lost 8 in a row last year. But if they lose 3 or 4 more and look bad in doing it, it's really going to be something on the table here. And nobody ever thought we'd be having this conversation. You know how many coaches and GMs we've fired in Buffalo in the last 10 years, John? I can't believe we're even having this conversation.
Listen, hey, Mike, I spent a lot of time in Edmonton. Same conversation. Same conversation. So.
I'm with Mike on the coaching chain. When you build the way that they have through the draft, you can't expect an absolute just linear growth. There's going to be dips along the way as players find their path, and that's just the reality of it. Ottawa's more of a hybrid between Detroit and Buffalo. If you want to look at the players that they've bought in, I would think that the seat would be hotter there in the nation's capital of Canada, Zeisberger.
Well, yeah, just one quick point going back to Harrington. I during the off season, I remember texting you and your coworker Lance during free agency day, and I was a little surprised because given the youth and the potential on the Sabres blue line, I was surprised that they settled for Clifton and they settled for Johnson. I realized, you know, that veteran presence that they wanted to bring in and such. But I just thought, you know, isn't this the time to bite the bullet and then bring in an Orlov, who I'm not saying is the beat all to end all, but I just thought that these guys were kind of Band-Aid type solutions as opposed to let's use this to take the next step. I mean, was I wrong with that? I mean,
no, I think these
guys just, you know,
I think they were going more for a guy like Brett Pesce in Carolina, somebody like that. I don't think they were necessarily looking in free agency. I think they were looking much more in the trade market, and nothing happened. And part of that is I think Kevin Adams is a little bit too much in love with all his prospects. At some point, you've got to trade some of them. Your prospects are there to develop, to become NHL players, or to be used as in trade market. But we see that a little more in baseball with prospects. Everyone in hockey loves their prospects because they love their entry-level deals. But yeah, this would have been the year to bring in another top 4 veteran D-man. I don't think they thought Clifton was a top 4. And Johnson has been good in the locker room, and he certainly helped the penalty kill. But Yeah, that's probably the biggest misstep. It's really not the goaltending. The goaltending was everybody talked about. The misstep was not really augmenting your defense, because Luukkonen's been more than good enough in goal. Now he's out sick, but that's been the issue, I think, when you look back on the summer for the Sabres.